The real driver of temperature, experts challenge fixation on CO2. In recent years, there has been a growing concern about the impact of human-caused CO2 emissions on the planet. However, some experts argue that the focus on CO2 as the primary driver of temperature change is misguided. They claim that temperature fluctuations are primarily influenced by solar activity, and CO2 levels follow temperature changes rather than causing them. Over the next few minutes, we will explore the arguments put forth by these experts and challenge the prevailing narrative surrounding CO2 emissions and climate change. The cost of climate change. According to estimates by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, achieving climate change sustainable development goals from 2023 to 2030 will cost each person in economies like the United States $2,026 per year. The global price tag for these goals amounts to approximately $5.5 trillion annually. Additionally, a report from the Climate Policy Initiative found that taxpayers worldwide spent $1.3 trillion each year on climate-related projects in 2021 and 2022. The report also suggests that annual climate finance needed from 2031 to 2050 will exceed $10 trillion. President Biden's stance. President Joe Biden has been a vocal advocate for addressing climate change. In November 2023, he announced $6 billion in new investments through the Inflation Reduction Act, IRA, and warned that denying the impact of climate change would lead to a dangerous future for the American people. The IRA is expected to provide $1.2 trillion of incentives by 2032, according to a report from Goldman Sachs. The Paris Agreement and CO2 reduction. The trillions of dollars being invested in climate-related initiatives stem from the goals set by the United Nations Paris Agreement. This legally binding international treaty aims to substantially reduce global greenhouse gas emissions to maintain a temperature increase of no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. However, experts argue that even if CO2 emissions were to cease today, any decrease in CO2 levels would not have an immediate effect on temperature. CO2 and temperature relationship. Contrary to popular belief, some scientists argue that CO2 does not cause global warming. Instead, global warming causes an increase in CO2 levels. They suggest that temperature fluctuations are primarily driven by solar activity, which affects the amount of solar energy reaching the Earth. These experts point to historical climate data and paleoclimatology studies to support their claims. The role of solar activity. According to Ian Clark, an emeritus professor for the Department of Earth and Environmental Sciences at the University of Ottawa, temperature changes throughout history have been influenced by solar activity rather than CO2 levels. He explains that the Earth's orbit and celestial events affect solar input, leading to ice ages and interglacial periods. CO2 levels then track these temperature changes, with a lag of approximately 800 years. Scientific studies and findings. Several scientific studies challenge the notion that CO2 is the primary driver of temperature change. William Jackson, a distinguished research professor specializing in planetary atmospheres, found that changes in atmospheric CO2 concentration did not cause temperature change in ancient climates. Another study published in Nature found an inverse trend between long-term atmospheric CO2 levels and temperature, especially after major events like volcanic eruptions. The carbon cycle and CO2 balance. Experts argue that CO2 levels in the atmosphere are part of a natural balance regulated by the carbon cycle. CO2 flows into plants through photosynthesis and soil through decomposition, is absorbed by the oceans, and is released through various processes. Once CO2 levels reach a certain point, nature automatically increases the outflow to maintain a balance. They compare this process to a bathtub with a spout that allows water to flow out when it reaches a certain level. Criticism of IPCC's claims. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, claims that the increase in CO2 concentration since 1750 is primarily caused by human activities. However, some experts argue that the IPCC's statement is inaccurate. They suggest that the IPCC's own carbon cycle data does not support the claim that humans are solely responsible for the increase in CO2 levels. Conclusion. While the prevailing narrative suggests that human-caused CO2 emissions are the main driver of temperature change, some experts challenge this notion. They argue that solar activity plays a more significant role in temperature fluctuations, with CO2 levels following temperature changes rather than causing them. These experts emphasize the need to consider alternative perspectives and explore other factors influencing climate change to develop more effective strategies for addressing environmental challenges.
As always, do not forget to like and subscribe to our channel, All Things Money, to see more content like this.